स्टडीज़ के आज के सेशन में हम शामिल हुए हैं एंड वी हैव प्रोफेसर बोधी फ्रॉम द TISS विद अस, जो हमारे इस स्कूल का मेंटरशिप करते हैं एंड एवरी मंथ हम लोग मिलते हैं और हम एक कन्वर्सेशन करते हैं, एक हम बातचीत करते हैं विद प्रोफेसर बोधी बेसिक कंसेप्ट इन बुद्धिज्म के ऊपर। स्कूल ऑफ बुद्धिस्ट स्टडीज ये डिजिटल नालंदा का एक स्पेशल एक स्कूल है जिसमें हम हर महीने आपके बुद्धिज्म को लेकर जो सवाल है उस पर डिस्कशन करते हैं और उस पर जितना हो सके ज़्यादा से ज़्यादा क्लैरिटी लाने की हम कोशिश करते हैं। तो हमेशा की तरह we'll ask the students or ask the joinees to put their questions. आप अपने सवाल हमें यहाँ पर चैट बॉक्स में लिखिए या जो YouTube पे जुड़े हैं हमसे, YouTube पे ज़रूर अपने सवाल लिखें and we'll put it across to बोधी सर। इसी तरह जैसे आपके कोई किसी भी सवाल को लेकर, किसी भी सवाल को के मद्देनजर अगर कोई भी आपको मतलब अगर आपको क्लैरिटी फिर से लानी है, आपने पहले सवाल पूछा है, मे बी उस पर आपको और क्लैरिटी चाहिए, तो आप उस बारे में भी आप फिर से हमें सवाल पूछ सकते हैं। यूट्यूब पर जुड़ने वाले लोग यूट्यूब पर जी, गुड्डू कुमार जी, आप अपने मोबाइल पर जो जहां जूम आपने कनेक्ट किया हुआ है वहां नीचे कनेक्ट विथ ऑडियो का एक ऑप्शन आता है, उसको क्लिक करिए। जूम क्लाइंट से जो जुड़े हैं या तो आप ब्राउजर के थ्रू जूम क्लाइंट से जुड़े और नीचे वहां पर आपको कनेक्ट विथ ऑडियो का ऑप्शन आता है नीचे लेफ्ट साइड में। चलिए, तो एनी so interested joinees, they may put their questions in our chat box. Also, joinees on our YouTube channel and Facebook, they may put their questions over there. So, okay. Kshitij has one question. So Kshitij Vasnik has asked me directly. Kshitij, you could put in the open chat box, but Kshitij has asked me, why does Buddhist families give so much importance to full moon, the Purnima day? And I have noticed this because I am from Buddhist family. Kshitij comes from a Buddhist family, and he's asking why Buddhist families give so much importance to the full moon or the Purnima day. Yes, very nicely put. These are curiosities which also need to be answered even by the practitioners. और कोई सवाल? आप कुछ सवाल हम पूछेंगे तो हम एक साथ वो उनको क्लब करके फिर हम सर के सामने रखते हैं। जी, इसके अलावा और कोई? सपना ताई, if we could get any questions from YouTube. So Nikhil Kumar is asking from YouTube, and we say that Buddhism itself is an education. Nikhil Kumar from YouTube is asking, can Buddhism itself be an education, or can we regard it as an education? निखिल कुमार फ्रॉम यूट्यूब. ओके, हरि प्रसाद जी ने पूछा है. हरि प्रसाद इज आस्किंग इफ क्या विपस्सना के अलावा भी और रास्ते हैं जिससे बुद्ध ने ज्ञान प्राप्त किया है? आर देयर एनी अदर मीन्स by which Buddha attained enlightenment apart from Vipassana? He is asking. Okay. Harshal D is asking. Sir, if I may put the next question. Yeah. So Harshal D is asking. Last time we discussed about Buddha Dhamma Sangha and how we pursue it in various levels. You also touched about Buddhist origin story, the Paticcasamupada. Can you please elaborate more on the concept of Paticcasamupada and Idappaccayata and how practitioners are pursuing it in various realms? Harshal is asking about practicing of Paticcasamupada and Idappaccayata. Then Ashwaghosh is asking, is there any role of courage in Buddhism? And if it is, then why it is not emphasized? If there is any role of courage in Buddhism, and if it is, why it is not emphasized? Hari Prasad has asked one question, but he's asking, what is Saddhamma? Vipassana, Saddhamma, Purnima, courage, Virya, Paticcasamupada, Idappaccayata. Okay. Any more questions?
Okay.
So these are
good, very good questions. You can hear me. Yes, you can hear me clearly, Subodh?
Yes, sir. Clear, sir. Loud and clear.
So good that people are thinking on these lines. These are very good questions. That shows not only their interests in Buddhism, but also the kind of question that challenges them as they attempt to understand what Buddhism is all about. So these are varied questions across, and it would be difficult to engage with each of these questions. But I think, like last time, I think some of the questions that have come today, probably we can begin to touch some of the basic questions, I think. And we can touch these basic questions, and probably other questions also will naturally fall in place in terms of understanding. From all the questions that have come, I think the most basic question is that which is related to this question which one of you have asked, that somewhat engages with the origin story of people like us who embrace the Buddha Dhamma Sangha. So we can touch upon this a little bit, and then we can see what other questions come, because this is a very complex subject. And it takes a lot of energy and a lot of time and a lot of reading and a lot of reflections for someone to begin to actually comprehend and have insights about what the Buddhists origin story is all about. I use the word origin story as to make it light. In the experience of Sakyamuni, this is not a story in that sense. This is something that you can find out on your own, through your own experiences, depending on your own self. To be able to kind of get a good understanding of this framework. So the origin stories of the Buddhists, if we begin, is often called the Paticcasamupada, that is in Pali. In Sanskrit, they call it the Pratitya Samupada, Subodh?
Paticcasamupada.
Pratitya Samupada. In Pali, we call it the Paticcasamupada. Now, what is very interesting about the Paticcasamupada, which is basically Sakyamuni's deep experience about how everything that we experience in this world, everything that exists in this world came to be. Is something that probably we can somewhat reflect today. It takes time because it's not such a simple concept. It's a very difficult concept. It takes time, so we have to go about it very slowly. Now, I use the word origin story to refer to the fact that many cultures, many traditions, many religions have their own ways of interpreting, own ways of understanding, and own ways of conceiving how everything in this world came to be. Among the most popular conception is what we called the origin story formulated around a creator God, a God that created the world. So there are many religions in the world that believe that this world came to be because there was a creator God. There was a God who created this world. And anybody who has sought to understand such an origin story would know that many people in this world, including our family members, including our friends, including many of them hold this kind of belief. If you ask them, where did this world come from? They will say this world came from, it was created by someone called God, all powerful, all presence, overarching every other reality that exists. The argument is simple, that this world came to be because someone created it, and the one who created it is so powerful that the concept of God is given to such a creator. If you ask other people, they will say that the reason that the world began, how did the world begin? The world began because of the existence of the first principle. And this first principle is supposed to be an unmoving principle. It is because there is an unmoving principle that a moving world arose and came to be. And this moving world is what we as human beings, the animal world, the plants, the trees, the water, everything that exists in the universe actually has manifested itself from this first initial unmoving principle that exists. Now, they have a number of other arguments, especially about the unmoving principle, but the unmoving principle or the first principle is also one of the ways in which people conceive how the world came to be. And this unmoving principle is always there. It doesn't move. And from this non-movement arises all the movement that we see and experience in this world. Then there is another group. If you tell them how did the world came to be, they'll say this world We do not really know how it came to be, but the one who actually has brought this world in the way it is so intelligent and such an amazing designer that the one who had probably created is a great designer or a great intelligent thing or a being in that sense. Now, this kind of an argument that the world came to be because of some kind of a great design or what is called the intelligent design is another argument that people give about the origin story of the world. So the first one is that the world came to be by the first origin story called the creator God. Second is that the world came to be because the existence of the first unmoving principle. Third is that the world came to be because some kind of an intelligent design that exists in anything and everything that you observe in this world. You might not be able to point out, but there is definitely a designer. The world, if you look at it, it's simple, but it's so intelligent. Everything from the micro quantum reality that is existing in this world, right till the macro large processes that exist. Everything in all of these are so well designed that it's unimaginable that anybody else, rather than a very intelligent being, would have created this world. And then those who are a little bit governed by other thinking frameworks, like science, for instance, they believe that we might not be able to know how things really began, but we can make assumptions that probably all of this that we experience began from something they call the Big Bang. And the Big Bang also becomes another kind of an origin story. Why do I call it an origin story? Because you cannot go back to the Big Bang and prove that the Big Bang actually took place. You can extend your argument by looking at the reality as it is now, especially in terms of laws and in terms of other processes that shapes the world, and then go back to the point in which one can actually make a mathematical calculation about how everything started in order to provide or produce a world such as that which we experience. But the Big Bang is another very powerful origin story. So many people who use the concept of origin story, they use the word origin story because no one can really go back and prove that there's really a creator God, that there's really a first principle, that there's really an intelligent designer, that there's really the Big Bang. But these are such powerful stories that if you were to go and try to ask any of your friends, like, this is the kind of answers they will give. Now, there are many tribal communities also in the world that have their own origin stories. Actually, every tribe has an origin story, how they came to be and how this world came to be. And the tribal origin story is also very, very interesting. If you go into the studies of these processes, you'll find many tribes explaining to you how everything came up in this world, how there is some kind of a being who basically either created the world or through some bird, they kind of manifest itself into the world in a particular way, or some geese, or the existence of earth and heaven as one. And then some stay in heaven, some stay on the earth. This is how they came to be. So there are many, many stories in which what is understood as the origin of the universe is kind of explained. So you may ask now, when everybody, let's say many, many religions of the world talk about creator God, some of them, the philosophers talk about the first principle. Now the great in people who are from biology talk about the intelligent design. People from physics, people from theoretical physics, people from quantum mechanics, they talk about the Big Bang. You may ask, how do the Buddhists conceive the origin of the world? Like, how is it that what is the Buddhist story about how the world came to be? Now, the Buddhist story of how the world came to be is what is explained in Siddhartha Gautama's or Sakyamuni's conception of the Paticcasamupada. This is how if you go deep into the roots of any kind of a practicing, aware, awakened Buddhists who somewhat understand what Buddhism is, both in terms of the theoretical framework and in terms of practice, this is exactly how they will tell you the world came to be. There are many Buddhists who are not very much aware about the Paticcasamupada. And even if they're aware, they do not know the details about it. But this is exactly how things came to be from a Buddhist perspective. So the Buddhist way of explaining this is based on the Buddha of Sakyamuni Buddha as he began to experience what is called the enlightenment, the awakening. On the night of his awakening, after days of sitting down, observing himself, observing his mind, observing his thoughts, observing his body, observing like a scientist, observing the sensations in his body. As the Buddha began to observe, as Sakyamuni began to observe what was happening inside his body, right from the content and the form of thought of what he was experiencing inside his body, and how he began to look at what the body goes through, as he began to experience his own sensations in every part of his body, he became awakened to this law called the Paticcasamupada. And the Buddha himself called it a law. And the law is something that anybody, you and me, if we actually engage, like there's a good question that came. Other than Vipassana, is there any other way of being awakened? Any other way of being not only awakened, but any other way in which human beings, can become enlightened? So there's a very good question that came by some of you. So is there any other way in which people can become enlightened if by any chance any other way in which people can become enlightened other than Vipassana? That's the question that came. Now, Vipassana and all of these practices we can explain a little bit later, because there are a lot of so many discussions taking place among Buddhists on this line. But right now, it's better to just focus on what is this thing called the Paticcasamupada, what that the Buddha experienced. Now, it seems from the available text that we have, which is called the Suttas, the Buddha was supposed to have said that anybody who has seen the Paticcasamupada, who has seen this law, has also seen what he calls the Dhamma. And anybody who has seen the Dhamma has also seen the Paticcasamupada. This Paticcasamupada is sometimes translated in English as the law of dependent origination. Some people also use the word the law of interdependent origination. Some would say the law of dependent origination and cessation. The law of dependent origination and cessation. So there are many ways in which people translate this particular concept, which is generally in Pali, into explaining in the English language what exactly it means. The generally accepted term is the law of dependent origination. That is how many people interpret it. But there are many other people who interpret it very, very differently. Now, this law of dependent origination, in the way the Buddha, the enlightened one, the awakened one, began to explain, constituted of 12 links. Very interestingly, in the way the Buddhist sees the world as a production of a reality that is dependent on links or layers, or what they call the necessary conditions. For a Buddhist, there is nothing that exists or nothing can exist if the necessary conditions is not there to allow a particular link, a particular layer, a particular reality to arise. Any reality that you experience has a necessary condition that gives rise to that reality that you experience. Nothing exists on its own, independent of anything else. All existence is only because of the existence of the necessary conditions in this world. And these necessary conditions, which the Buddha speaks in terms of links, are 12 in numbers. Now, the Buddha experienced these 12 links from first backwards and then forward. He did what is generally called the observation of the Paticcasamupada backwards and tried to understand each of these links from the 12th till the first. And then went again from the first to the 12th. And then again, he went from the 12th to the first to the 12th. So he did 3 times he investigated these links on the night of his enlightenment, on the night of his awakening. Before we go into these links, 12 links, you have to understand how each of these links are fundamentally grounded and why they are the necessary condition for the rise of another layer of reality. We must understand one more concept. I think that question was also asked. Can you explain a little bit about the Idappaccayata? Idappaccayata is a beautiful concept in Buddhism. Before we go into the 12 links of dependent origination, we have to understand one concept. It's called the Idappaccayata. The Idappaccayata is a beautiful, it's like it's a way in which Buddhists see what are the forces or what are the things, what is there in order to give rise to something else. So it's spoken of not as a force, but it's spoken as a process. A fundamental process that is there, that then allows for the production of another layer of a reality. So before we understand the 12 links of dependent origination, how the world came to be, and this is a huge, massive framework. This is how the whole universe came to be. It is not how human beings come to be, how plants came to be, how animals came to be. No. This is how all of universe comes to be. And in Buddhism, though, we don't speak about universe, we speak about multiverse. We believe that there are layers and layers of multiverses in this world. And if universe means everything that exists, from the planets to the Milky Way, to the everything that exists is to be contained in a word called universe. In Buddhism, we say that is only one way of looking. There are also something called other multiple universes that exist. So the Paticcasamupada is a theory that helps explain all these multiverse reality rather than just a universe. But before we begin, as I said, to engage with this 12 links of dependent origination, we have to understand this one concept called the Idappaccayata. Now, what is the Idappaccayata generally explained as being? It is also called this/that conditionality. People call it the this/that conditionality. And many explained it as the embodiment of a causal evolutionary principle. How does evolution take place? What are the causal elements in the evolutionary process, which is the determining principle that allows change to take place in this world, in this universe, in this multiverse? So the Idappaccayata is generally defined as an embodiment of a causal evolutionary principle that is formulated as this, that conditionality. There's a beautiful line that goes like this. When this is, that is. From the arising of this comes the arising of that. So when I use the word conditionality, and the way to explain this conditionality is that anything that exists, that has to have a causal evolutionary principle called this. So if I'm sitting here, this, it gives rise to me talking to you, that. So because this exists, that exists. With the rising of this arises that. This does not exist independent of anything else, and that also does not exist independent of anything else. Everything is just a causal relationship that allows the evolutionary principle then to move towards what we call change. So the interpretation of Idappaccayata is that nothing in this world, nothing in this universe exists independently. Because of this, that arises. When this arises, that arises. And then it goes on to say, when this is not, that is not. From the cessation of this comes the cessation of that. Some of us who have experienced a lot of, let's say, difficulties in our life, it could be, physical difficulties, it could be livelihood, it could be even your mental processes. Your depression, if you ever suffer or experience, is not because it had come out of the blue, independent of itself. That which is called a depression arises because there is something else called this, which becomes a necessary condition for your depression to arise. So suddenly you don't sit one day and you don't get up and you say, now I am sad in this world. No, I am depressed. You don't say like that. Everything has a causal evolutionary principle. Because this happened, that arises. And then when this is not happening, that also does not happen. And when sometimes the Buddha says, when that secedes from the cessation of something else, that also secedes, like that. So when the thing that generated your depression secedes, then depression itself becomes down. So the depression that you experience in your life or in my life or in each other's, some of us who experience it, we know that this is only something that manifests because something else has happened to me. And it could be physical, it could be, because of it even can have sometimes even a genetic reason for it, or it can have a reactive life experience related to it, or it can be many things that happen in your own mind because you're unable to engage with some of these processes, except some of these things that happen to your mind. It generates a lot of tension, a lot of emotions, a lot of sadness, a lot of depression. So these are the kind of things that can be explained as to try to give a glimpse about what Idappaccayata means. So if someone asks you, how does the Buddhist look at change? How do the Buddhists look at cause and effect? What is the theory of cause and effect in Buddhism? Then the Idappaccayata is that theory. And in Buddhism, simple. When this is, that is, with the rising of this arises that. When this is not, that is not. From the cessation of this comes the cessation of that. This is exactly how Buddhists look at the world. So for Buddhism, there is nothing called foundational, there is nothing called fundamental. Everything arises, passes, moves away. Everything arises, passes, moves away. That which arises, if something else secedes, that also secedes. So the world is a process of so many things taking place, rising, passing, And if someone's search goes deep into finding out why this is happening to me, you'll realize that there is no real reason. It's just a process of rising, passing, and moving away. This is exactly how the Buddhists look at the most foundational cause and effect relationship between things in this world. Now, with this as a principle of how things move, how things be, how things become, we can begin now to try to comprehend the Paticcasamupada. So, in short, the Paticcasamupada, as I told you, constitute of 12 concepts. And each of these concepts are part of a link. And each layer of that link gives rise to another layer of another link. That's why it's called dependent origination. Something that originates is dependent on another necessary condition. And so on and so forth in 12 processes. The first is generally called, the word that is used is called avidya. So it goes something like this. Avidya Pakaya Sankara. So the second concept in the Paticcasamupada is called Sankara. Avidya Pakaya Sankara, and Sankara is the second concept. Sankara Pakaya Vijnana. Vijnana is the third concept. Vijnana Pakaya Nama Rupa. Nama Rupa is the fourth concept. Okay. I'm just trying to first give you a framework. And I think many of you who knows Buddhism knows this, you've heard about this, but since today we are discussing about these processes, it should kind of give it a glimpse about what are these 12 concepts. The first concept is called avidya. With avidya as a necessary condition arises sankara. With sankara as a necessary condition arises vijnana. With vijnana as a necessary condition arises nama rupa. With nama rupa as a necessary condition arises salayatana. With salayatana as a necessary condition arises phassa. With phassa as a necessary condition arises vedana. With vedana as a necessary condition arises tanha. With tanha as a necessary condition arises upadana. With upadana as a necessary condition arises what is called bhava. With bhava as a necessary condition arises jati, jara, marana. So you have 12 concepts, each a link that give rise to something else. Avidya gives rise to sankara. Sankara gives rise to vijnana. Vijnana gives rise to namarupa. Namarupa gives rise to salayatana. Give rise to phassa. Give rise to vedana. Give rise to tanha. Give rise to upadana. Give rise to bhava. Finally giving rise to jati, jara, marana. Now, these 12 concepts are not simple concepts, and I'm glad that you guys who have come for this, conversation with me and with Subodh will have to put some effort to understand, because the Buddhist origin story is not a story of the Big Bang. Oh, everything started from the Big Bang. Or everything started from a creator God. Or everything started from a first principle. The Buddhist origin story, as you can see, is complex. How did the world came to be? The world, there was avidya, the necessary condition. It gave rise to sankara. Then sankara gave rise to vijnana. Then vijnana gave rise to namarupa. Then salayatana. Then phassa, vedana, tanha, upadana, bhava, jati, jaramana. And this is how we experience our world. So in Buddhism, it is beautiful in the sense that we look at the world as originating from these links of dependent origination. This is also what is called the layered view of the world. The world is nothing but layers and layers and layers and layers of reality. And each layer arising because of a necessary condition that exists. And that also which exists arises because something else exists, and so on and so forth. Now, what do these concepts mean is the point that we have to discuss. And I think probably it'll take us 2 sessions. Probably all of you who are very serious on Buddhism and trying to understand Buddhism, it'll take us at least 2 sessions to really understand. Today, I can at most just throw some ideas because, even a person like me have taken years to understand the Paticcasamupada. It did not come in a single day by listening to a single lecture. I have listened to so many lectures, but still I don't understand. And the reason is because the way Buddhists look at how the world came to be is so complex. It's like it's not simple. Like, why don't someone just come and tell me, "Arey, God created the world. How did the world came to be? God created." Such a simple answer, such a beautiful answer. And then I go to this Buddhist and I ask them, "How did the world came to be?" The world came to be because of the necessary conditions. With avijja arises sankara, sankara arises. Don't the Buddhists have a simple answer how the world came to be? No, the Buddhists don't have a simple answer how the world came to be. The Buddhists have a very complex answer, but this complexity, the Buddha himself called a law. And anybody, including you and me, through effort can discover this law on our own. We don't have to believe. The Buddha says, don't believe me. Many great Buddhists have always said, don't believe. Discover for yourself if what you are looking for, what you are searching for, is something in which you are very serious about. You really want to know. And in wanting to know, you are putting all the effort to discover this law. So in Buddhism, what the Buddha said is not a story for people to kind of, relate as a narrative. What the Buddha said is simple. You can discover it for yourself. I have discovered it. I can explain it to you, but at the end of the day, you will have to discover it yourself. Yeah. So in that particular sense, the Buddhist origin story is a little bit of a complex story in that way. Now, there are many translations, but I will give you today the simplest translation. I will not complicate it. The Buddha says that these 12 links of dependent origination, and remember, I told you the Buddha started from the 12th and then came to the first. And even when he reached the first, he did not conclude. He said there are many, many more things. And after he has examined for hours on end, it seems 6 hours from backward, 12th link to the first link, he spent another 6 hours to examine from the first link to the 12th link. And then he did another 6 hours of going back and forth, examining this whole structure of how it came to be. So in this framework, Buddha begins with what is generally understood as this experience that human beings have, which is what he called stressful, lamentation, grief, pain, sorrow, fear, despair. He says, if you look at human beings, like I myself have experienced, we go through this tremendous, whether we like it or not, once in a while we are experiencing despair, sadness, lamentation, guilt, grief, stress. As human beings, we always experience this. It is difficult for any human being to say that I have never experienced stress in my life. I have never experienced fear in my life. I have never experienced sadness in my life. I've never felt guilty in my life. I've never felt, for instance, despair in my life. It's very difficult for human beings to say this. Whether you're young or you're grown up or you're old, somewhere, somehow, what basically governs our life experience is these things that we go through, and they're very painful. When you are happy, you don't understand what pain is. But when you experience sadness, oh my goodness, life pulls you down. And the Buddha says there are many reasons for this. There are many, many reasons. And he used the word to explain this kind of an experience of sadness, of sorrow, of despair, of fear, of guilt, of grief. He used the word dukkha, experiencing of sadness and experiencing of pain. Life seems to be, we as human beings seems to be overwhelmed by this thing called dukkha. Unimaginable to have met any human being who could say, I have never experienced sadness in my life. I have never experienced pain in my life. I have never experienced fear in my life. It's difficult to meet a human being like that. It's not that we experience sadness throughout our life, but it comes, it goes, it comes, it goes. Despair comes and goes. Fear comes and goes. So all of these emotions that we experience, which he calls dukkha, are things that comes and goes and seems to be govern every so-called aspects of our life. So the Buddha says, many of us who are experiencing this, take it as normal. We don't take it too much so serious about, Are Baba, sadness comes, sadness goes. But there are some kind of what he calls suffering or dukkha, in which people experience so bad that it becomes very difficult to even come out of it. Now, this will resonate with people in this group who have experienced depression. And you will know how difficult it is to come out of depression. You will know what kind of feelings and negativity goes in your head when you experience depression. You will know how lethargic, how fearful, how painful, how tired you feel when you experience tremendous suffering in your life. And if you ask me very frankly, I'm sure the Buddha himself have experienced these processes. It is not possible for him to begin to speak this language if he himself had not gone through tremendous pain, tremendous sadness, tremendous suffering, dukkha. Now, dukkha doesn't mean only it happens in your mind, it happens in your body. Dukkha can arise because of your state of being, coming from an excluded community. Dukkha can happen because of many other factors that is social in character. When people experience oppression, it can happen because of existential issues. There's an earthquake, there's a war, there's a flood, there's so many things happening which is out of your control. Dukkha can happen because of many things. Don't reduce dukkha to this thing that happens in the mind only, and then happening to people as though, others will not kind of experience. No, the Buddha does not speak about dukkha in that line. The Buddha says dukkha can be generated, can be experienced by many people because of multiple reasons. So he says that this dukkha, also sometimes this dukkha is also interpreted as a state of discomfort, or some people call it a state of unsatisfactoriness. You never feel satisfied about anything. The moment you feel satisfied, again, unsatisfaction has occurred. The minute you feel comfortable, again, discomfort has occurred. The minute you feel happy, again, sadness has occurred. And the Buddha was saying, why is this happening? Why is this dukkha taking place? So the first thing that he realized, that all of this layer of dukkha that arises, if you go to the roots of it, he calls it the experiencing of dukkha arising out of what he calls jati jara marana. Jara marana basically is translated as aging and death. Said there is something about this movement that is taking place called aging and death, aging and death. Constantly you feel that you are suddenly you begin to age. If you go, then as you age, you are fearful of death. At the root cause of all the pain that we go through is this fear of death, of this discomfort that arises because we are aging. Now, the younger people will not understand this, but the older you get, you'll begin to have a comprehension of what fear arises because we are aging and you're losing your youth and you're becoming something else. And then your future is death await in the future for anybody. And anybody who's born has to die. There is no one who is born and live forever. And this jara, marana, aging and death is the root cause of how all of this suffering that arises in you called dukkha takes place. Now, these can be many reasons, but the root cause, the root reason is what he calls aging and death. And this aging and death arises because of birth, because you are born. And he calls birth as jati. So jati, jara, marana is translated as birth, aging and death. Jati, jara, marana. Birth, aging and death. So if there is something very fundamental about your life, it is that you are born, you are aging, and that you will die. This is the fundamental root cause of the rise of all sufferings, all lamentation, all grief, all sorrow, all pain, all depression, all sadness, everything, all unsatisfactoriness, all dissatisfaction. This is the root cause, that we are born, that we are aging, and that we will die. This is the root. Now, many people would say, Arey, how can that is the root? Yesterday, I had a fight with somebody else. And during that fight, that person said something very nasty to me. And today I'm very angry, and I'm very, very, very angry. And I'm very, very sad that this was said. Now, the Buddha was not talking about that level. He said that that is true. You are angry because, or you're sad because someone said something nasty to you. You are sad because something has happened to you in your social life. You're sad because something happened to you while you were studying or when you were working, and then you were asked to leave your job. So there are many reasons for the sadness. But if you search for the roots of how all this sadness happened, it's simply because you are alive, you are aging, and that you are likely to die in the future. That is the first, what is called the 12th and the 11th link. Jara Marana arises because of jati. You age and death because you are born. So age and death is a manifest, a dependent origination in which jati is the necessary condition. Because you are born, so you will age and will die. Now, the Buddha began to examine this, and he realized, now this birth, aging and death, jati, jaramana, is a root cause of all of this suffering that I experience. And I'm so attached to this birth, so attached to this age, so attached to this thing called life, that when I begin to think about death, aging, I become fearful. I become dissatisfied. I become sad. I become fearful. Now, when he examined it in that way, he began to realize that jati, jara, marana also is something that manifests because of another necessary condition, which he calls bhava. And bhava, on the other hand, is translated in the Buddhist circles as the concept of becoming, constantly becoming something else. So there is something about life in which human beings constantly become. Human being cannot be, but only have to become something else all the time. So this process of change that we go through from being and becoming, being and becoming, being and becoming. We can never say that now this is me, I will not grow anymore, I cannot move anymore, this is me for the whole life, I want to be like this only. You cannot say that. The minute you say that, you've already become something new. No one can stop the process of becoming something. Even if you say, I do not want to, you cannot stop it. Something is there as a force that will force you to become something else. So in the Buddhist explanation, they use the word being and becoming. Okay. So this notion of becoming is the reason why birth, aging, and death occurs. That's what the Buddha says. So there is something deep down in the layers of the necessary conditions of reality, and constantly moving and being and becoming that give rise to birth, aging, death. And then as you passed away, this so-called becoming again give rise to birth, aging, and death, and so on and so forth. And this whole gamut of pain, suffering, fear, and lamentation, and grief, and despair. Then he examined more. He said, is this the end is becoming the end, is becoming the only reason why life, birth, aging and death occurs? No, he said no. He said, when I examined this notion called being or bhava or becoming called bhava, I began to realize that the reason for me becoming is because of upadana. Upadana is translated as clinging. I'm clinging to something. There is this process called clinging that happens unconsciously. And it's because of this clinging that becoming takes place. If I let go of clinging, the becoming stops. But the minute I cling to something, becoming takes place. And then he says, but is clinging, what am I clinging to? What is it that I'm clinging to that helps me to become something new? He uses the word tanha. There is something, this clinging arises because I crave for something. There is something called craving that occurs in my own body, in my own mind, in my own life, and so on and so forth. Now, interestingly, by these stages of what you call bhava, upadana, tanha, becoming, clinging, craving, there are unconscious processes that takes place in your body. Now you're not conscious anymore what is happening. Jati Jara Marana is a conscious process. Okay, I know that I was born. I know that I'm aging. I know that I'm dead. There's a conscious experience of these. And then you see it happening in your life. Many people, even close friends, families, and all of that, you have seen them being born. You have seen them aging. You have seen them die. So these are things that you can see and observe. But he says this thing called bhava, becoming, upadana, clinging, tanha, craving is not something that you can see. It is happening to you. It's happening to everybody. It's happening to anything and everything that you observe, even outside of your own reality. But you're unconscious about this. Craving, clinging, becoming, you're unconscious. You're not aware about it. So then he says, is craving, what is it that I'm craving? And he began to examine this craving. And he realized that this craving arises because of something he called Vedana, or what is sometimes explained as feelings. And feelings is sometimes explained as sensations. There is these billions of sensations in the body, which human beings experience as feelings. So Buddha says, when you experience sadness, sadness is nothing but sensations moving in a particular manner. Fear is nothing but sensations moving in a particular manner in your body. Everything that is emotional is a manifest of the state of sensations that takes place in your body. So he says, when I start finding out what am I craving, actually this craving arises because of what he calls Vedana, or feelings or sensations that takes place in this body. So craving is dependent on sensations and feelings called Vedana. Otherwise, human beings will not experience craving if there is no sensation. They will not experience craving if there is no feeling. This craving happens because of this existence of feelings. And he said, but what is it? Is feeling the root cause of all of this experience that I have? He examined it further and realized that no, this feeling, or what he calls Vedana or sensation, and he explained it beautifully. He says, when people feel at the level of sensation, they feel something called pleasant sensation, unpleasant sensation, and neutral sensation. When you have pleasant sensation, you crave for that sensation. When you have unpleasant sensation, you are averse to that sensation. When you have neutral sensation, you are not bothered. You're not worried. Everything is okay. You smile. But immediately when the body starts becoming tense, then when you begin to experience fear, then these unpleasant feelings generate tremendous tension in your body. And it generates what is generally called layers and layers of what he explained as dukkha. But when you have pleasant sensation, you like it. Sometimes you're very thirsty and you drink very cold water. You feel very nice. The body feels very nice. Sometimes when you are feeling a lot of tension in your body and there's a lot of unpleasant sensational feelings, then there's a lot of, you are averse to it. You do not like it and you hope that it will go away. Sometimes it generates sadness, depression, everything. So the root cause of all of these feelings that we have is to be explained in what sensation we have, pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral sensations. So this is what the Buddha calls Vedana. And then he examined this Vedana and he says, how does Vedana occurs? How does the sensation occurs? So the Buddha says he realized that sensation arises because of the existence of a necessary condition called phassa, or contact. Now, what is this contact all about? How does it take place? When is it that things come into contact? He started examining this contact and he realized that contact occurs because human beings have what is called salayatana. Reality itself has something called salayatana. And what is salayatana? The sixth sense door. We have five senses, and the sixth sense, which is called, well, in Buddhism, it's called mano. It's also called the thinking brain, the cognitive process. Human beings have five sensations plus one. Touch is one sensation. Smell is one sensation. Hearing is one sensation. Eyesight is one sensation. And taste is one sensation. So five sensations plus one sensation called the thinking cognitive process is what the Buddha says human beings have. Now, even the animal world has it, okay? But human beings also have what is generally called the sixth sense door, translated as, in Pali, salayatana. So he says that when I begin to examine the reason of why Vedana occurs, sensation occurs, these sensation occurs because I come into contact. What do I come into contact with? With many things in the surrounding environment. And what is it that comes into contact? Salayatana, or what he calls the sixth sense door. Because we have the six senses in us, these six senses, eye contact, hearing contact, taste contact, touch contact, smell contact, the thinking contact, immediately this becomes the reason why, for instance, sensation begins to take place in your body. If you never had any contact and didn't have any senses, then you would not be experiencing sensation. But the minute you have your six senses, the minute they come into contact, you hear something that someone says, your body starts, sensation starts moving in your body. You see something, sensation starts happening in your body. You taste something, sensation happens in your body. You touch something, sensation happens in your body. You are thinking something, sensation happens in your body. So this sensation has its roots in a contact that has its roots in your sixth sense door. And the Buddha says, because we have sensation, and he speaks about six sensation, that all of this, phassa, contact, vedana, feeling, tanha, craving, upadana, clinging, bhava, becoming, jati, birth, jara marana, aging and death occurs. So salayatana, human beings have these six sense door. The minute these senses come into contact with anything, sensations have started occurring and they will grow, they will move in your body. And sometimes you feel pleasant sensation, sometimes you feel unpleasant. When you feel pleasant, you crave for pleasant sensation. When you feel unpleasant sensation, you are averse to unpleasant sensation. So human beings constantly experience craving and aversion, desire and aversion. They desire that which makes their body feel nice. And they are averse. They don't like something that the body doesn't feel nice. And all of this, the Buddha says, happens at the level of the sensations. So that person who was asking me right now, is Vipassana the only way? The Buddha says, unfortunately, Vipassana is the only way for you to become awakened. Because Vipassana is the only technique that you can examine your sensation without being identified with the sensations itself. Now, what is Vipassana and how it's done, we can discuss some other time. But at this point in time, it's good for us to focus on trying to understand these 12 links. So we have completed the 12th link, Jara Marana. We have completed the second link, Jati. We have completed the 10th link, Bhava. We have completed the 9th link, Upadana. We have completed the 8th link, Tanha. We have completed the 7th link, Vedana. We have completed the 6th link, Phassa. We have completed the 4th link or the 5th link, Salayatana. And the Buddha says, but is Salayatana the only reason why we are experiencing everything in this world? Why this thing is happening? Is it only because I have 5 senses plus 1? Then the Buddha says, no. The more I examine this, I realize that if I find out where the Salayatana, the 6 sense doors arise, it arises from what he calls Nama Rupa. He says Nama Rupa is the necessary condition that give rise to Salayatana, or to the 6 sense door. Nama Rupa is translated as name and form. Nama Rupa. Nama is name, Rupa is form or matter or substance. So he says the reason that the 6 sense doors arise is because of name, form, and substance. All this thing that you see in this world, all this sensation that arises, the necessary condition that exists for it to arise is because there is matter, form, and substance. What is form? Shapes, size, length, breadth. That is form. It comes in that kind of form. Okay. The form is what is Subodh's form? Subodh's form is how long how tall he is, how broad he is, so on and so forth. That is generally what we understand as form. And what is Subodh made of? He's made out of matter, molecules, cell. This is exactly what constitutes his body and my body and your body. So Buddha says these senses arises because there is matter. And this matter manifests in terms of form. You look at a tree, the form of a tree. Look at the bird, the form of a bird. Look at the hills, the form of a hill. Look at the river, the form of a river. Look at anything in this world, everything is form. The tree has its own form. The plants have their own form. The animals have their own form. Human beings, but all of them are fundamentally constituted by matter. But matter not as free-floating, matter as manifested in name and form. So the Buddha says, the reason human beings experience Salayatana, 5 plus 1 sense doors, is because there is matter, form, and substance. Without that, there is no Salayatana, there is no 6 sense doors. It is only because matter, form, and substance, Nama Rupa, exists that give rise to the 6 sense door in human beings, especially in sentient beings. Okay? So the Buddha says, now I have arrived. Now I know how the world comes to be. Right from pain, suffering, dukkha, he went on, found another necessary condition. He went deeper, he found something else. He went deeper, he found something else. He went deeper, he found something else. Now he has reached Namarupa, form, matter, and substance. Then he says, is Namarupa the base? Is there anything that exists that gives rise to Namarupa? And then he realized, yes, there is something else that exists. Namarupa is not an independent reality. Marxists would say Namarupa is the basic, independent, standalone reality. Matter, form, and substance. They call it matter in motion. Because there is matter in motion that life arises, economic system arises, political system arises, culture arises, religion arises. The Buddha says, no, that's not the base. Matter, form, and substance is not the base. Matter and form, substance arises because of what he calls vijnana. And vijnana is often translated as consciousness. And consciousness, not in terms of the consciousness that we're experiencing each other. You are seeing me, I'm seeing you. That is called sense door. You are seeing me because you have sensation, the eyes that can see me. I cannot see you because you put your camera off, so I cannot see. I see only Vasnik, Survade, Bhav, and Ashwaghosh. I cannot see you because you're not allowing me to see you. But if you put your camera on, then immediately my eyes will have a contact with you and I'll say, aha, this is Subodh. I can only see Subodh. So I know that Subodh is there. So this is not the consciousness the Buddha is speaking about. Here, he says, Nama Rupa, matter, form, or substance, arises because this matter, form, and substance has something called consciousness or vijnana. He says every matter, every cell, every molecule, every atom, every subatomic particle, whether it's a proton, neutron, electron, each of these are conscious. They are alive. They are moving. And he calls the consciousness of each single particle in this world, the subatomic, the atomic, the molecule, the cell, everything that exists that constitutes your body, my body, the tree, the plant, the river, the air, the oxygen, everything that exists has consciousness. Beautiful. What a concept, I'll tell you. Everything that exists at the matter of a cell, of an atom, of a subatomic particle exists and has its own consciousness. This is what he calls vijnana. And then he thought, oh my, now it's done. Now there is nothing more to examine. Then he said, wait. He began to examine, where does this consciousness of every small particle coming from? And he realized that this arises only because of sankhara. Sankhara is the necessary condition why vijnana arises. And sankhara is explained as fabrications. And by some people call it mental fabrication. Some people call it the rising and passing away of particles. So sankhara, in your body, you are constantly experiencing, in the words of the Buddha, what is called the rising of so-called particles and the passing away of those particles. You are aging, you are going to die because in your body, millions of cells are being born and millions are dying every moment. There is nothing in your body that is static. Millions of cells are being born. They rise and they pass away. As much as they are born, so they die. And this process, he calls it sankhara or sankhara. What is sankhara, he says? He says this thing of the consciousness of particles arises only because there is one particular layer of the reality in which particles come, rises and passes away. It happens everywhere, including your own body. Billions of cells being born, rising, and billions of cells dying every moment in your body. And anything in the universe experiences the same phenomenon. It's a law. He calls it a law. Sankhara is a law. So he thought, my goodness, so this is what it is all about. This is how the world came to be. There is something called conscious particles that exist everywhere, that rises, peaks, passes away, rises, peaks, passes away, born, aging, and death, born, aging, and death. And so fast, you can't even measure them. Impossible to measure them. They are so fast, like this. Billions have been born, billions have died. And he thought, now I have found the cause of the rise of everything in this universe, right from Plato, Jupiter, Uranus, Mars, Earth, trees, sun, bird, water, oxygen, nitrogen, carbon dioxide, everything arises out of this so-called rising, peaking, and passing away of the sankharas. And then he said, but is the sankhara the basis? And the more he examined the sankhara, he realized, no, sankhara also arises because of something else. There's another necessary condition that arises, that sankhara is not independent. It arises because of what he calls avidya. Now, this word avidya is often translated as ignorance. In Buddhism, people say avidya means ignorance. In Pali, in Sanskrit, they say avidya or ignorance. But in the way the suttas explain, avidya is also translated as a state of non-knowing a state of non-knowing, or a state of what is often spoken in the Pali text as a state of the unmanifested, the unborn, the unarisen. Beautiful words. He said there is a reality that is there, that is unmanifested, unborn. It is there. And it is from that state that all of this sankara, vijnana, namarupa, salayatana, phassa, bhava, all of these processes arises. And he did not go beyond that. He says this, although he did not know, someone asked him, but where did this come from? He says, that I do not know. And I don't have time to go into the details about something that I do not know. The only thing I can tell you that if you were to examine yourself scientifically and go deep into everything that you experience, right from your suffering, dukkha, right till your body is sensation, right till your sense door, right till matter, form, and substance, right till the consciousness of every single particle and atom in this universe, right till what is the rising, peaking, and passing away of these so-called subatomic particles, you will arrive at a state called avidya, a state of non-knowing. And that is alive. Alive. It is full of life, full of so much reality and so on and so forth. So it is here that he began to realize. He said, oh my goodness, I thought it was, when I examined the world, I thought that it was only about suffering. But the deeper I go, suffering arises because of jati marana, jati jara marana. Jati jara marana arises because of bhava. Bhava arises because of upadana. Upadana arises because of tanha. Tanha because of bhava. Bhava because of vedana. Vedana because of phassa. Phassa because of salayatana, namarupa, vijnana, sankhara, avijja. This is the origin story of the Buddhists. If you ask Buddhists, how did we come to be? What is this world? How did this world come to be? A Buddhist answer is avijja pakaya sankhara. With the avijja as a necessary condition arises sankhara. Sankhara pakaya vijnana. Vijnana pakaya namarupa. Namarupa pakaya salayatana. Salayatana phassa, vedana, tanha, upadana, bhava, jati, jat. This is the world from a Buddhist lens. Many people will say, hey, these Buddhists are a little bit difficult to explain because, for me, where did the world came to be? God created the world. For a scientist, how did the world begin to be? Big Bang occurred. You ask a Buddhist, instead he's saying, this ling give rise to another ling, give rise to another ling, give rise to another ling, and then there are 12 lings of dependent and origination. And the Buddha never answered questions that are too philosophical. He said that is not needed. I am concerned about what is happening in your life, and I want to explain to you the root cause of suffering, the root cause of pain, the root cause of sadness, the root cause of everything. I'm not concerned about philosophical questions. Who is beyond avijja? I'm not concerned about that. Tell me. What I have told you, will it help you get insights into what is happening to you in order that you can experience happiness, you can experience emancipation, you can experience liberation in this world? That is all that is needed. Beyond that is not needed to go into the details about reality. The Buddha did this first, from jati, jara, marana till avijja, and then he examined again, and he realized avijja gives rise to sankhara. Sankhara give rise to vijnana, on and on till jati jara marana. And he did this 6 hours backward, 6 hours forward, 6 hours backward and forward, 4 times. And he made a statement. Anybody who has seen the Paticcasamupada has seen the Dhamma. And anybody who knows the Dhamma has to know the Paticcasamupada. This is the origin stories of the Buddhists. So this is something that anybody can discover. This is not a story that the Buddha said and said, this is how the world came to be. The Buddha says, this is a law. And this law is fundamental. For a Buddhist, the world is not governed by a God and a devil. For a Buddhist, the world is not governed by a heaven and a hell. Everything that is governed in this world is governed by a law. And that law is called the Paticcasamupada. And a direct insight into this law means freedom, enlightenment, and awakening. Until you have that insight, we will keep on wondering about why we suffer, how we suffer, what is the root cause of suffering, why am I sad, why am I depressed, what to do, what not to do, and so on and so forth. So it is a very complex idea. It will take a lot of time. It has taken me a lot of time to understand this. It's not something that just comes out of the blue. The 12 links of dependent origination are the most complex idea in Buddhism. Complex. And as you can see, if you do not really engage and put effort into practice, it is impossible for you to understand it theoretically. This is not a theory to be consumed merely by reading. This is a theory to be consumed by sure effort and practice. Only practice, the Buddha says, only effort, the Buddha says, can you free yourself and become awakened. Now, last thing I want to tell you is that many of us who have done Vipassana, many of them who have engaged in that kind of a process of investment of serious effort to begin to experience the Dhamma, to begin to experience the Paticcasamupada, have reached certain level. But we have many of us, I have not met many people who have gone to the state of avidya itself. But I know for sure that many of you here would have experienced craving, And if you're interested, we can speak a little bit more details about this thing called craving and aversion. Many of you who have done Vipassana will have heard craving and aversion. This thought comes and that thought comes. And when this thought comes, it generates a lot of fear. And when this thought comes, it generates a lot of pleasant feelings. But the minute this thought comes, that other thought also will come and trouble me. My mind is constantly a state of war with itself. When this comes, that comes. When that comes, this comes. And I do not know what is happening. I have lost sense of who I am. I'm depressed. I'm sad. I cannot accept myself. It is so painful. Oh my goodness. The Buddha says, no matter how much depressed you are, no matter how painful your life will be, no matter what sadness you experience, remember, there is a way out. When every door has closed in this world for you, the message of the Buddha, there is still one door in which you can actually emancipate yourself from suffering. So the Buddha's message for the Paticcasamupada is simple. There is nothing in this world that you experience as a human being that closes all the doors in which you feel there is nowhere else to go. When nothing else works, the Buddha says, he didn't use the word Buddhism, but the teachings of the Buddha works. This is the message that the Buddha gave. It means don't give up whatever situation you might be in. There is also ways a way out. Life is valuable. Everything is very valuable. The bird is valuable. The tree is valuable. The world is valuable. Human beings are valuable. The sun is valuable. The oxygen is valuable. This experience that we have is an amazing experience as human beings. And you have to not only see the value there, but also put effort to realize the totality of this being, through a process we call awakening or enlightenment. Anyway, it's a complex idea. Take time. If we come again next time, we will speak again about this. Okay, and I will stop here and ask Subodh to somewhat translate to give us in Hindi so that we can have a good understanding of this. Okay, Subodh.
So thank you for yet another insightful session, and even those who have asked other questions also, it seems it has answered their questions also. So इसे हिंदी या जो हिंदुस्तानी जिसे समझते हैं मैं उनके लिए जरा एक जिस्ट में ट्रांसलेट कर देता हूँ। और क्योंकि सवाल आया था ओरिजिन स्टोरी के ऊपर, यानी जिसे हम कहते हैं उत्पत्ति, जिसे कहते हैं, तो उत्पत्ति का जो सिद्धांत है अन्य सारे धर्मों में और सारे कल्चर्स में अलग अलग तरीके से उत्पत्तियां का एक जैसे ना अपना कॉन्सेप्ट उन्होंने बताया। तो जैसे सर ने शुरू किया कि पिछले अभी सेशन में हमने उत्पत्ति के ऊपर में बात की थी, और बुद्ध धम्म संघ में जो लोग आए हैं वो लोग इसे किस तरह देखते हैं। उत्पत्ति या जिसे हम कहते हैं ओरिजिनेशन की स्टोरी बोला जाता है। स्टोरी यानी कहानी बताई जाती है। कहानी इसलिए क्योंकि किसी को भी इस पर श्योरिटी नहीं है कि वो होगा, लेकिन उनका बिलीफ सिस्टम या उनका एक अजम्पशन होता है जिस पर वो टिके होते हैं और उस पर उनका कार्य आगे का चलता है। तो जैसे धार्मिक जैसे एक ग्रुप्स होते हैं, जैसे विभिन्न धर्म है, इस्लाम है, क्रिश्चियनिटी है, वे लोग उत्पत्ति जो समझते हैं वो समझते हैं कि एक क्रिएटर गॉड थे, एक अल्लाह यहाँ उनके परमेश्वर थे जिन्होंने इस किस्म की सृष्टि को उत्पन्न किया, इस किस्म के अलग अलग किस्म के जीवों को, नेचर को उत्पन्न किया, और वह परम पिता है। और परम पिता यानी बहुत स्ट्रॉन्ग, यानी दोस्त बहुत पावरफुल, वो एक किस्म की एक एंटिटी है। उसी तरह देखा जाता है कि ये सबसे पॉपुलर ने मानी हुई पूरी दुनिया में इस चीज को माना जाता है कि भगवान या परमेश्वर ही इस सृष्टि के ओरिजिनेटर है। दूसरा एक है कि दूसरे ऐसे लोग मानते हैं कि एक ऐसा एक ग्राउंडेड और एक अनमूविंग ऐसा एक लॉ है, एक प्रिंसिपल है जिसके इर्द गिर्द ये सारी सृष्टि की रचना हुई है, सारे इस पूरे यूनिवर्स की रचना हुई है। और वो ऐसा प्रिंसिपल, ऐसा सिद्धांत है जो टस से मस नहीं है, एक ही सिद्धांत पे ये सारी सृष्टि चल रही है। इसके अलावा ऐसी भी एक मान्यता है जो ये तो नहीं कहता कि भगवान या किसी ने किया है, बट जिसने भी किया है वो एक बहुत ही इंटेलिजेंट डिजाइनर है, एक बहुत ही बौद्धिक क्षमता बहुत स्ट्रांग रहने वाला एक ऐसा एंटिटी जिसने बहुत सूक्ष्म लेवल पर बहुत अच्छी तरह से ये सृष्टि के सारे कंपोनेंट्स, भले वो इंसान हो, नेचर के सारे प्रोडक्ट चीजें हो, प्लांट्स हो, नदियां हो, पहाड़ हो, यूनिवर्स के चीजें हो, उनको डिजाइन किया है। तो एक मान्यता ये भी है। साइंस क्या कहता है? विज्ञान कहता है कि हम भी नहीं जानते, लेकिन वो अजम्पशन पे जरूर बेस होता है कि साइंस में हम देखते हैं कि किसी भी डिस्कवरी के लिए एक अजम्पशन की एक बेसिस बना होता है, और उस अजम्पशन का साइंस में आधार जो लेते हैं उत्पत्ति का, वो लेते हैं बिग बैंग थ्योरी से, कि बिग बैंग थ्योरी के बाद में ये सारा सृष्टि जो है वो धीरे धीरे दूर दूर जाके अपनी एक, जिसे कहते हैं इक्विलिब्रियम पा के, अपना एक कंडीशंस पा के उन्होंने अपनी उत्पत्ति की है। तो उस बेस पर भी काफी थियरीज और काफी बिलीफ उजागर हुए हैं और उत्पन्न हुए हैं। अभी उसके अलावा काफी ऐसी सोसाइटीज है, जैसे ट्राइबल सोसाइटी, उनके भी अपने कुछ वहां पर सृष्टि के रचना के ऊपर, ओरिजिन स्टोरी के ऊपर में अपनी अपनी मान्यताएं जरूर है, काफी इंटरेस्टिंग जो रही। अब बात यहाँ आती है कि बौद्ध या बुद्धिस्ट लोग इसे किस तरह देखते हैं। तो बुद्धिज्म में अगर देखा जाए तो, अगर बुद्धिस्ट व्यक्ति से कोई वार्तालाप करे कि ओरिजिन स्टोरी आपकी क्या है, तो वो लोग में भी चिढ़ जाएंगे, क्योंकि उनको एक कोई ढंग का आंसर नहीं मिलेगा, और शायद उनको लगेगा कि बुद्धिस्ट व्यक्ति हमारा मजाक उड़ा रहा है, क्योंकि वह जो बात बोल रहा होता है वो एक कॉम्प्लेक्स बात बोल रहा होता है कि बुद्धिज्म में एक कोई स्थिति नहीं, बल्कि स्थितियों की एक कड़ी या कड़ियां जुड़ती है, उसको ओरिजिन स्टोरी के रूप में हम बताते हैं। इन्हें बुद्धिस्ट बताते हैं कि उत्पत्ति जो है वो एक किसी स्थिति का नहीं, बल्कि अनेक स्थितियों का एक मिला जुला एक कॉन्सेप्ट है, एक मतलब मिला जुला एक जिसे कहते हैं एक लॉ है, एक कायदा है, एक उसका एक सिद्धांत है। और सिद्धांत के ऊपर जब आता है तो इसका मतलब ये होता है कि ये प्योर अजम्पशन भी नहीं है, ये बुद्ध कहते हैं कि ये हर एक इसको देख सकता है, इस सिद्धांत को अपने लेवल पर एक्सपीरियंस कर सकता है। तो इसीलिए ये अजम्पशन की भी जो अवधारणा है उससे भी ये दूर ले जाकर ये प्रैक्टिस और जिसे कहते हैं अपने ऑब्जर्वेशन से पाने वाली स्थिति है। इसीलिए भले ही ये ओरिजिन स्टोरी भी होगी, लेकिन ये केवल स्टोरी नहीं रह जाती, ये उससे आगे एक किस्म की ऑब्जर्व करने वाली, अपने ही एक्सपीरियंस से जानने वाली एक ऐसा सिद्धांत या ऐसा कॉन्सेप्ट ये हो जाता है। तो बौद्ध कैसे देखते हैं जिसको, उसे बोला जाता है, सर ने जिसे कहा कि शाक्य मुनि यानी भगवान बुद्ध ने इसे पतिच्च समुत्पाद नाम से कंसीव किया। पतिच्च समुपादा जिसे हम पाली में कहते हैं, पतिच्च समुत्पाद के एक जो कॉन्सेप्ट है, इसे हम बुद्धिस्ट थियोरी ऑफ ओरिजिन हम कहेंगे, बुद्धिस्ट ओरिजिन का सिद्धांत कहेंगे। तो यहाँ पर जैसे सर ने कहा कि कैसे ये थ्योरी उत्पन्न हुई, कैसे जाना, तो बुद्ध की जो अवेकनिंग की रात थी, जो एनलाइटनमेंट की रात थी, उस रात को ये उनका एक ऑब्जर्वेशन, और कम से कम 4 बार उन्होंने इस चीज को बार बार टेस्ट किया, अपने लेवल पर टेस्ट किया, अपनी बॉडी में सेंस होने वाले सेंसेशंस को, उसमें उत्पन्न होने वाली तरंगों को जानकर इसे बार बार टेस्ट करके ही हमारे सामने बुद्ध लेकर आए। अब अंग्रेजी में जिसे कहते हैं, इसे कहते हैं थियोरी ऑफ डिपेंडेंट ओरिजिनेशन, यानी किसी पर किसी अन्य अवस्था के ऊपर डिपेंडेंसी, यानी उस पर से उत्पन्न होने वाली चीज। तो बुद्धिज्म में ओरिजिन जो है वो किसी ना किसी एक कंडीशन या किसी ना किसी एक अन्य चीज के ऊपर में डिपेंड है। बुद्धिज्म कभी नहीं कहता कि कोई भी स्थिति अपने खुद के वजह से एग्जिस्ट कर रही है, उसका अभी का एग्जिस्टेंस या किसी रीजन की वजह से या किसी उसकी प्री कंडीशन की वजह से। इसीलिए इसको डिपेंडेंट ओरिजिनेशन कहा जाता है अंग्रेजी में, या डिपेंडेंट ओरिजिनेशन एंड सेसेशन, यानी उत्पन्न होना और खत्म होना या पास हो जाना। तो यहाँ पर 12 कड़ियां हैं, सर ने जैसे कहा। और अभी यहाँ पर क्या है कि इसको भी जानने के लिए पूरी तरह पतिच्च समुत्पाद पे आने के पहले पकायता, जिसे हम कहते हैं कहाँ से आना, तो इदप्पक्कायता की हम स्थिति को पहले हमको समझना होगा। तो इदप्पक्कायता जैसे सर ने कहा, वो प्रणाली या वो कॉन्सेप्ट है या वो लॉ है जिससे हम जानते हैं कि कोई भी चीज ये इंटरडिपेंडेंट होती है या एक दूसरे के ऊपर में जरूर उसका डिपेंडेंसी होती, क्योंकि किसी वजह से ही वो दूसरी चीज उत्पन्न होती है। तो इसे सर ने बहुत अच्छे से कहा कि इसे दिस दैट कंडीशनैलिटी कहते हैं। दिस दैट कंडीशनैलिटी यानी ऐसी कंडीशन या ऐसी चीज, ऐसा एक जिसे हम कहेंगे कि एक चीज का होना उसके ऊपर निर्भर करता है कि उसके पहले कोई चीज अस्तित्व में है, और ऐसा ही किसी चीज का नहीं होना भी, क्योंकि पहले वो कंडीशंस उसकी पूर्तता नहीं कर रही, इसलिए वो चीज नहीं है। अब इसे हम समझेंगे जिसे कहते हैं कॉजल रिलेशनशिप। कॉजल मतलब कारण वाला, यानी किसी के कारण उत्पन्न होना या किसी के कारण उसका ह्रास होना या खत्म होना। तो इस किस्म की सिचुएशन को या इस किस्म की एक सिद्धांत को इदप्पक्कायता कहा गया है हमारे पाली लैंग्वेज में। और इसी को जानने के बाद ही हम हमारे 12 लिंक्स यानी पतिच्च समुत्पाद को हम क्लैरिटी से जान पाएंगे। तो बुद्धिस्ट लोग या बौद्ध लोग कॉजलिटी को या कारण के प्रिंसिपल को किस तरह समझते हैं? तो यहाँ पर कॉज एंड इफेक्ट जिसे हम कहते हैं, या जिसे हम कहते हैं कि किसी भी चीज के कारणवश दूसरी चीज का होना, इसको बहुत ज्यादा इम्पोर्टेंस है बुद्धिज्म में। यानी कोई भी चीज अपने खुद पर अपने आप विकसित नहीं होते हुए किसी की चीजों के किसी प्री कंडीशन पे, किसी चीज की वजह से, यानी कॉज की वजह से वो उत्पन्न होती है या खत्म होती है। जो लोग दुख या डिप्रेशन जैसी स्थिति से गुजरे हुए हैं, उनको ये थोड़ा जान सकते हैं, क्योंकि डिप्रेशन ये अपने आप में उत्पन्न होने वाली चीज नहीं है। डिप्रेशन के कारण होते हैं, जैसे वो भी समझ पाते हैं कि कुछ पास्ट में या अपने मन पे जो संस्कार हुए होते हैं, उसका एक उत्पन्न होने वाली कंडीशन होती है डिप्रेशन या ऐसे एक्सट्रीम पेन की स्थिति। तो ये उसका एग्जाम्पल होता है। एग्जाम्पल है इदप्पक्कायता की, जो कॉज है किसी रीजन की वजह से दूसरी चीज का आना, उत्पन्न होना या खत्म होना। तो इदप्पक्कायता में जैसे हम देख रहे हैं कि कोई चीज का उत्पन्न होना, उसका चलना और उसका खत्म होना, ये कंडीशन हमेशा बुद्धिस्ट मेंटेन करते हैं अपने किसी भी चीज को। जब वो देखते हैं कि कोई भी चीज उत्पन्न होती है, चलती है या अपना लाइफ जीती है और खत्म होती है, ये हमेशा एक लाइफ साइकिल का पार्ट रहता है। अब नेक्स्ट हम आते हैं पतिच्चसमुप्पाद। तो इसी को इदप्पक्कायता को ही आधार रखते हुए बुद्ध ने 12 कड़ियां जोड़ी है। और 12 कड़ियां कैसे जोड़ी है कि उनको जब पूछा गया स्थितियों के या किसी परिस्थिति के या किसी भी चीज के उत्पन्न होने की या उसके ओरिजिन के ऊपर में, तो उन्होंने कहा कि इसका एक लॉ है, इसका एक सिद्धांत है, जिस पर मैंने काफी सोच विचार के, काफी इसमें मशक्कत के बाद में मैंने आपके सामने ये लाया है। अब इसमें क्या क्या स्थितियां हैं, क्या क्या कड़ियां हैं, 12 कड़ियां हैं, जिससे सर ने बहुत विस्तृत रूप में डिस्कस किया, और उसको भी देखने के अन्य नजरिए हैं। उसमें से एक ही नजरिया आपके साथ में सर ने डिस्कस किया है। ठीक है, तो पहला इन 12 कड़ियों में हम देखते हैं कि स्थितियां कैसे एक के ऊपर एक डिपेंडेंट है। तो सबसे पहली कंडीशन है अविद्या। अविद्या यानी जिसे हम कहते हैं जहां पर आपको अविद्या की स्थिति, जहां पर आपको कोई भी यानी अज्ञान, जिसे हम सिंपल भाषा में कहते हैं, या किसी चीज के बारे में जानकारी पूरी तरह ना होने की वजह से इन चीजों का उत्पन्न होना। इसके बाद में अविद्या के बाद आता है संकारा, संकारा के बाद आता है विनयाना, विनया के बाद नाम रूप, फिर सलायतना, फस्स, वेदना, तन्हा, उपदाना, भव, जाति और चरमगन। अब इन 12 कड़ियों को बुद्ध ने बैक एंड फोर्थ जाना। 6 घंटे उन्होंने अपनी इन चीजों को ऑब्जर्व किया कि पहले अविद्या से जाति मरा और कभी कभी जाति मरा से अविद्या की तरफ बार बार टेस्ट करके आया, और उन्होंने यही सारे एक्सपीरियंसेस बार बार अपने लेवल पे पाए। अब हम एक नजरिया, जैसे हमने कहा कि क्योंकि बुद्धिज्म या हम जिस प्रोसेस से गुजरते हैं वहाँ अनेक सिचुएशन हमारी तरफ, तो एक सबसे इजी जिसके कहते हैं, या हम जिसे कॉमन मैन के लिए या सबके लिए अंडरस्टैंडिंग का एक सबसे बड़ा माध्यम है कि हम किसी भी चीज को जब परस्यू करते हैं, जानते हैं, तो सिंपलेस्ट फॉर्म में सबसे पहले हम देखें। तो यहाँ सर ने बहुत हमारे रोजमर्रा की बहुत इम्पोर्टेंट चीज जो है, जिसे हम कहते हैं दुख, हम में से हर एक व्यक्ति, हर एक किसी ने इस चीज को एक्सपीरियंस जरूर किया है, और इसके ऊपर हम हमेशा क्वेश्चन करते हैं कि ऐसी स्थिति हमारे साथ में क्यों आती है। हर किसी ने कभी ना कभी स्ट्रेस, कभी ना कभी डर, कभी ना कभी गिल्ट की भावना जरूर ऑब्जर्व की है अपने अंदर। कभी ना कभी एक्सट्रीम सैडनेस या बहुत दुख की उन्होंने परिस्थिति झेली है ना, एकदम पेन, एकदम और सॉरो, और बहुत ज्यादा जिसे कहते हैं ना एकदम लो फील करना है। तो ये दुख जो है, इससे हम सबों ने अपना एक सबका अपना एक इस पर एक्सपीरियंस जरूर रहा है। तो दुख को जैसे कहते हैं कि दुख आता कहाँ से है, तो बुद्धिस्ट इसको कैसे देखते हैं? इन्हें सिर्फ एक किसी के चीज के नहीं होने की वजह से दुख है, या किसी चीज को अपनी जैसे उन्होंने पाना चाहा था उस तरह से नहीं हुआ इसीलिए। पर बुद्धिज्म इसको देखता है बहुत थोड़ा डीप जाकर। इसको सर ने जैसे कहा कि अनसेटिस्फैक्टरीनेस, इसको एक बहुत अच्छा सर ने नाम दिया है। दुख को जो ट्रांसलेट किया अंग्रेजी में अनसेटिस्फैक्टरीनेस, यानी ऐसी स्थिति जहां पर आप उसके रीजनिंग से या उससे खुश नहीं होते। मे बी उसका रीजन होता है कि मे बी हम उसको कॉम्प्रिहेंड सही से नहीं कर पाते, इस वजह से। अब इसी पटिच्चसमुप्पाद को हम इस नजरिए से देखते हैं, जहां पर हम शुरू करते हैं हमारी लास्ट कंडीशनलिटी से कि जाति जन्म मरना। तो जाति जन्म मरना से मतलब है कि जाति मतलब बर्थ, जन्म मतलब एजिंग और डेथ। तो ये जो तीन चीजें हैं, यही जाना जाता है कि दुख का कारण जो है वो इन तीन बेसिक चीजों से ही जरूर हम जोड़ते हैं, क्योंकि किसी चीज की जन्म होने के बाद ही वहां से वो कॉम्प्लेक्सिटी हम जोड़ते हैं कि ये दुख का कारण या दुख का एक रिफ्लेक्सिव हमारे लिए वातावरण यहाँ पर तैयार होता है। तो जैसे सबसे जो लास्ट जो कंडीशन या 12th जो लिंक बताई थी सर ने पटिच्चसमुप्पाद की, उसे कहते हैं जन्म मरण। इसका मतलब होता है एजिंग और डेथ, यानी बड़ा होना और खत्म हो जाना या मर जाना। तो यहाँ पर जैसे हम मर जाने के ख्याल से या बढ़ने के ख्याल से लोग अपना एक खो देते हैं, अपनी खुशी खो देते हैं। जैसे ये जन्म के बाद से ये स्थिति उत्पन्न होती है, तो जाति के बाद से स्थिति उत्पन्न होती है। अब ये दोनों स्थितियां हम जानते हैं, ये फिजिकल भी है, ये पता है ये हो रहा है। यहाँ पर जाति जन्म मरण की स्थिति जो है वो उत्पन्न होती है फ्रॉम व्हाट इज कॉल्ड भवा। भवा मतलब जहां पर आप बिकम होते हो। बिकम होना मतलब जहां पर किसी भी स्थिति को, किसी भी स्थिति में या किसी भी जन्म की स्थिति को आप हासिल करो। तो भव मतलब यहाँ पर आपने कोई चीज को बनाया, किसी चीज से आपने अपने आप को जिसे कहते हैं ना एक अपनी एक मैं की स्थिति पाई, भव की स्थिति पाई। वो जो है भव की स्थिति वो कहाँ से आई है कि भव की स्थिति का मतलब ये भी है कि मैं क्या बनना चाहता हूँ। यानी एक अपने लिए भी आप ये सोचते हैं कि मुझे ये ऐसा दिखना है, मुझे ये आगे जाके ऐसा दिखना है। और तो वो स्थिति कहाँ से आती है? वो स्थिति आती है उपदाना से। उपदाना मतलब ऐसी चीज जो आप दिल से बहुत अच्छे से करना चाह रहे हो, या आप वो चीज पर क्लिंग कर रहे हो। क्लिंग कर रहे हो मतलब आप उससे खुद को, अपने आप को जोड़ रहे हो कि हाँ मैं अपने आप को ऐसा देखता हूं, या मैं इस चीज को पाना चाहता हूँ। इसको कहते हैं क्लिंगिंग, यानी उस आइडिया से अटैच हो जाना कि हाँ मुझे ऐसा ही अपने आप को मैं मैनिफेस्ट करता हूँ, देखता हूँ। इसे कहते हैं उपदाना। अब ये उपदाना की कंडीशन ये आती है सब अनकॉन्शियस वे में, ये आपको जानते बूझते नहीं करते। यहाँ बुद्ध और डीप जाते हैं। इस उपदाना की भी कंडीशन कहाँ से निर्माण होती है? वो होती है तन्हा, यानी हम इसको यहाँ तृष्णा बोलते हैं, संस्कृत हिंदी में तृष्णा। यहाँ पर क्रेविंग सर ने कहा, क्रेविंग यानी उसके लिए एक अंदरूनी सबकॉन्शियस लेवल पर एक उसके लिए एक जिसे हम कहते हैं राग, शुद्ध हिंदी में कहते हैं, उसके लिए अपने लिए ये मुझे पाना ही है, इस किस्म की ये कंडीशन, इसे कहते हैं तन्हा। और ये तन्हा कहाँ से आता है, ये जो क्रेविंग कहाँ से आती है, ये उन फीलिंग्स और सेंसेशन से आती है जो आपको वहां ऐसी ही किसी स्थिति में आपको पहले कभी मिली थी। यानी अगर आपको वो चीज अच्छी लग गई, भा गई, तो आप वो चीज बार बार करने को देखते हो, या अगर बहुत अच्छी लगी तो अपने लिए वो पाने की जिद या उसके ऊपर में आप काम करना शुरू हो जाते। तो ये जो क्रेविंग है जो जिससे उत्पन्न होती है, वो ऐसी कोई अच्छी गुड फीलिंग या सेंसेशन की भावना से होती है। अब सेंसेशन के भी काफी रूप है। एक ऐसा सेंसेशन है जो आपको हर चीज को क्रेव करने को लगाता है, ऐसा भी सेंसेशन आता है जिससे आपको एक्सट्रीम दुख होता है। जैसे कोई सौरों की परिस्थिति आती है, कोई गिल्ट की परिस्थिति, तो आपकी बॉडी में ऐसे सेंसेशंस उत्पन्न होते हैं जो एक दिशा में मूव करते हैं, और उस वजह से आपको वो स्थिति बिल्कुल भी पसंद नहीं आती है। तो उसको अवर्जन सर ने कहा, उसको हम कहेंगे द्वेष की स्थिति कहेंगे, कि आप बार बार उस द्वेष की सिचुएशन में आप अपने आप को नहीं देखना चाहते। तो हम क्रेविंग की सेंसेशंस में हमेशा जाना चाहते। तो इस स्टेट को, इसको कहते हैं वेदना, वेदना संवेदना जिसे हम कहते हैं, जहां पर हम उस चीज को हासिल करना चाहते हैं। ऐसे भी सेंसेशन होते हैं जहां आपको कुछ भी फील नहीं होता है, और उसको न्यूट्रल सेंसेशन करते हैं, जिसको आप ज्यादा बॉदर नहीं करते। अब इस सेंसेशन की स्थिति भी कहाँ से आती है, सेंस कब होता है, जैसे हमको हवा टच करती है स्किन पे, तभी हमको सेंस हो रहा है, यानी कांटेक्ट होना। कांटेक्ट होना मतलब अब हमारे शरीर में केवल एक सेंस नहीं है, हमारे सेंस में हम बुद्धिस्ट जानते हैं कि 5+1 यानी 6 सेंसेस होते हैं। 5 तो हमारे सारे सेंसेस हो गए, जीभ, आँख, स्किन और हियरिंग। इनके अलावा एक और सेंस है, वो है हमारा माइंड, क्योंकि हम किसी भी चीज को सेंस जब करते हैं उसका हम एक थॉट प्रोसेस भी चलाते हैं, तो थॉट प्रोसेस भी एक सेंस का ही पार्ट है। तो इस पूरी जो सेंसिकल 6 सेंस डोर जिसे कहते हैं, दरवाजा कहते हैं, एक जो 6 सेंसेस का बना होता है, इसे पटिच्चसमुप्पाद में फस्स नाम दिया गया है, इसे फस्स कहते हैं। और इसी कांटेक्ट की वजह से हम को पॉजिटिव, नेगेटिव या इस किस्म के सेंसेशंस या फीलिंग्स जरूर डेवलप होते हैं। अब ये जो सेंसेसेस है, यहाँ पर भी बुद्ध नहीं रुकते। ये सेंसेसेस ये सेंसेस जहां से उत्पन्न हुए, इन 6 सेंसेस, उसको कहा जाता है सलायतना, और जहां ये कांटेक्ट होते हैं उसको कहा जाता है फस्स। तो सलायतना, जैसे मैंने अभी गलती से फस्स में कह दिया, एक्चुअली ये सलायतना में आते हैं 6 सेंसेस डोर, जहां पर आपके 5 सेंसेस प्लस आपका मन इसे प्रोसेस करता है। और फस्स वो स्थिति है जहां पे ये सेंस कांटेक्ट में आते हैं और आपको वेदना यानी फीलिंग्स जनरेट करते हैं। अब जैसे एक किसी हमारे स्टूडेंट ने पूछा था कि विपस्सना के अलावा कोई और टेक्निक है क्या ये जानने के लिए, तो अनफॉर्चुनेटली विपस्सना के अलावा और कोई टेक्निक नहीं है, और इसके लिए आपको जरूर एफर्ट लगाने होंगे। तो सलायतना यानी 6 सेंस डोर के भी डीप में कहा होता है कि सलायतना भी, सेंसेस भी कहाँ प्रैक्टिस होती है, कहाँ पे होता है, क्योंकि एक किसी फॉर्म में, किसी एग्जिस्टेंस में उनका होना जरूरी होता है, क्योंकि उस फॉर्म से ही जब वो एक रूप होती है, वो सेंसेस उसमें काम करती है, तभी वो एक पर्टिकुलर किस्म की फीलिंग्स जनरेट करते हैं। तो नाम रूप इस कंडीशन को कहा जाता है। इस किस्म के नाम और रूप यानी एक किस्म का फॉर्म, सब्सटेंस, मैटर जिसे हम कहते हैं, तो जहां से एक कहते हैं ना, एक पूरा उसका प्रारूप हमको या फ्रेमवर्क हमको जहाँ दिखता है कि इस फ्रेम का ये व्यक्ति है, इस फ्रेम की ये एक पेड़ है, इस फ्रेम का एक पहाड़ है, इस किस्म के जो जितने भी फ्रेम्स है उसके भीतर होने वाले जो उनके अपने सेंसिकल चीजें हैं, तो उसको एक फॉर्म देने वाली स्थिति को कहते हैं नाम रूप। अब ये नाम रूप जो है ये भी कहाँ से जनरेट होता है, एक किस्म की कॉन्शियसनेस से जनरेट होता है, एक किस्म की चेतना से जनरेट होता है कि हाँ ये मेरा फॉर्म है, हाँ ये मेरा स्ट्रक्चर है, हाँ मैं ये हूँ। तो इस कंडीशन को कहते हैं विनयाना यानी कॉन्शियसनेस। यहाँ बुद्ध बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट इंटरवेंशन करते हैं कि वो कहते हैं कि नाम रूप और विनयाना की कॉन्शियसनेस ये केवल हम जैसों में ही नहीं, लेकिन एटॉमिक पार्टिकल्स, हर मैटर में, हर सेल में, सब एटॉमिक पार्टिकल्स में, हर चीज में अपना एक कॉन्शियसनेस, अपना एक विनयाना का अपना एक कॉन्शियसनेस जरूर होता है। तो ये बहुत, और ये कॉन्शियसनेस है जो इनको अपनी एक अस्तित्व देती है, अपना मोबिलिटी देती है। तो ये बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट इंटरवेंशन है कि हर पार्टिकल को, हर चीज को यहाँ पर बुद्ध ने कहा है कि विनयाना का उनमें जरूर एक होती है। विनयाना जो है वो आता है फैब्रिकेशन यानी संकारा से। संकारा की जो स्थिति है ये है कि ये सबसे बेसिक लॉ है। संकारा मतलब राइज होना और सॉरी जन्म लेना, राइज होना और पास होना, यानी इस स्थिति में ही हम देखते हैं कि कोई भी मैटर जो है वो अपने आप को उत्पन्न होता है, वो काम करता है और खत्म हो जाता है। इस स्थिति को कहा जाता है संकारा, और उस काम करने के दौरान ही उसमें वो विनयाना या कॉन्शियसनेस की सारी स्थितियां उसमें प्रैक्टिस होती है। और ऐसे अनेकों बिलियंस ऑफ ऐसे पार्टिकल्स हैं जो हमेशा हमारी बॉडी में जन्म लेते हैं, ऐसे सेल्स हैं जो जन्म लेते हैं, काम करते हैं और खत्म हो जाते हैं। तो ये एक संकारा नाम से एक सिद्धांत जो है इसी प्रतिसमुत्पाद का एक सेकंड नंबर का इसमें कड़ी है। और इसके भी भीतर जब नीचे जाते हैं, ये जब कहाँ से आता है, ये आता है अविद्या से, यानी जिसे हम हिंदी में अविद्या कहते हैं, और जनरली इसे लोग इग्नोरेंस कहते हैं, यानी किसी चीज को नहीं मालूम होना कहते हैं। लेकिन सुत्त जो है, बौद्ध सुत्त इसे कहते हैं कि ये केवल इतना ही नहीं है। बुद्धिस्ट सुत्त कहते हैं कि ये एक स्टेट है जहाँ पे आपको जानकारी नहीं होती, ये आप किसी चीज से महरूम होते हैं, ये ऐसी स्टेट है। उस स्टेट में आपका मन इस किस्म की ही उड़ाने लेता है, नेगेटिविटी की तरफ जाता है, दुख की तरफ जाता है, कि ये जिसके कहते हैं ना, ये अनबॉर्न होना या किसी चीज की आपको जानकारी नहीं होना, उस चीज की तरफ का सोचने की दिशा नहीं होना, इस चीज को अविद्या यहाँ पर हमने कहा है। तो ये बैक एंड फोर्थ बुद्ध ने 4 बार इस चीज को टेस्ट किया पटिच्चसमुप्पाद नाम से, और इस जिसके हम कहते हैं इस पूरे एनलाइटमेंट की प्रोसेस में ये उनका सबसे भेदक और सबसे इम्पोर्टेंट उनका इंटरवेंशन रहा है। अब हम इस पर जो बेसिक जो हमने बात की, राग और द्वेष की बात की, क्रेविंग एंड एवर्जन की बात की, इसको हम सर ने कहा कि जैसे हम नेक्स्ट सेशन में जरूर कवर करेंगे। लेकिन जो भी हमारे साथ एंगेज कर रहे हैं, सबसे एक वो है कि जो बुद्धिज्म में इंटरेस्ट लेते हैं, सीरियस है, ये केवल पढ़ाई से या किसी बातचीत से ही नहीं होगा। इस पर आपको काफी एफर्ट्स लगाने होंगे और प्रैक्टिस में लाना होगा, तभी आप इस कॉन्सेप्ट को अच्छी तरह से और अपने बेहतरी के लिए जान पाएंगे। क्योंकि प्रतिसमुत्पाद को जानना, इन चीजों को जानना एक कहते हैं ना, एक रास्ता है, एक फ्रीडम की तरफ, एक किस्म की अवेकनिंग की तरफ। तो यह मैं थोड़ा जिस्ट में मैंने, क्योंकि समय की कमी है इस वजह से मैंने बताया, वरना और भी कुछ जैसे हमारे क्वेश्चंस भी रहेंगे वो हम अगले सेशन में जरूर लेंगे. So sir, yeah, I mean almost finished with the, yeah.
So we can stop it today. And again, next month we can. I'm so happy that everybody is coming and continuously coming. There's some of you I'm seeing attending many of these sessions. I mean, I know it's available in YouTube, but it's very important because to study Buddhism, you cannot study alone. You need a Sangha to study Buddhism. You need a group to study Buddhism. And you need a group that is willing to share knowledge, share experience, share insights. This is how you grow in Buddhism. Because Buddhism is both a knowledge system and a practice. It's not just merely theory that you can read in some book and understand. So it's very good to see so many people very active. And I hope they also come next time also, and then we can continue the discussion.
वो फिर सबको धन्यवाद करते हुए और सबसे ज्यादा बोधी सर को थैंक यू करते हुए आज का सेशन यही समाप्त करते हैं. थैंक यू सो मच एवरीवन. एंड अगले महीने जरूर फिर से हम मिलेंगे हमारे 5th सेशन में एंड विथ योर क्वेश्चंस एंड विद बोधी सर. सो थैंक यू एवरीवन. थैंक यू फॉर ज्वाइनिंग. जय भीम. जय भीम सर.